Let's get started. We've got a lot to cover. I am Kathy McPhillips, and I am the Chief Growth Officer here at the Marketing AI Institute. And I'm joined by my colleague, Mike Kaput, who many of you know. He's our Chief Content Officer. He heads up content, editorial, audience development for the Institute, among many other things. So the way today's going to go, this is our first Blueprint webinar of 2023. We're hoping for a lot more. This one's on content marketing. We're hoping for analytics, personalization, things like that. So you'll get notified as those are published. So this one's content, content creation, generative AI have been really hot topics over the past few months. If you've heard of this little thing called ChatGPT, that kind of sparked a lot of conversation within the industry. So Mike is the author of this blueprint, and you'll receive a copy of this ebook at the end of the presentation, also tomorrow via email when I send you an email with the recording of this presentation. So our goal today is to walk through some of the key highlights of the blueprint to give you a better understanding of AI in the world of content marketing. And we hope you leave here with some new ideas, new tools, new resources to help. So Mike's presenting. I am here. If you've seen me on intro with Paul before, you know that I'm here asking questions, moderating the day, but Mike's going to really take over for the hour. So Mike, I'm going to let you jump in.
Sounds great, Kathy. And to the last few people jumping in, Kathy mentioned it, but today's presentation is really kind of the highlights of our AI for content marketing blueprint, which is an exclusive resource we've developed for our audience and our community. And everyone will get the ungated link to that during this presentation, as well as in an email, I believe, tomorrow. So without further ado, I'm going to dive in because like Kathy said, we have a ton to cover. We have a lot of really interesting information, use cases, and tools to get through today. So before we dive into exactly how you can use artificial intelligence in content marketing, I want to take a few minutes to kind of outline the bigger picture opportunity that exists for content marketers of any professional level or professional discipline to actually use artificial intelligence to grow their careers and their companies. And it really starts with a pretty simple problem, simple but not easy to address. And every content marketing team faces some version of this problem. Content bottlenecks. They prevent you from hitting content and revenue targets. Now, content bottlenecks can mean a bunch of different things to a bunch of different people, but there's some pretty big common ones that are preventing content marketers, in our opinion, from reaching their full potential. So let me know if any of this sounds familiar. Your team is being asked to do more with less due to scrutiny of budgets, headcount, productivity. We're all under a lot more pressure recently, especially due to some of the economic headwinds happening at the moment. Sometimes your team doesn't move fast enough to publish the type and volume of content that your audience demands. Or you may have glaring content and messaging gaps because you either haven't been able to create the right content to address certain topics, or you're not able to create it at the high volume and scale you need to meet your audience's needs. Now, these problems and many others that cause these kind of content bottlenecks, they're not easy to solve on your own. And if you leave them unresolved, as I'm sure we've all seen in different contexts, these problems can really negatively impact your content performance, your career, and even your company at large. So this is
Mike, real quick, not to interrupt you, but Lucas said nailed it. So, I think you're hitting on some key pain points with some of our attendees. So if anyone has any specific, if Mike, struck a nerve when he was going through some of those lists, I'd love to know in the chat, just what are some of the things you're struggling with on your teams? And we'll see if we can address those in some of the questions and some of the points Mike's hitting on.
Yes, please do, because especially, we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence and some maybe new topics to people, but really it comes down to solving real world challenges that real world content marketers have. And this is one of the big reasons that some of the smartest content marketers out there are turning to artificial intelligence. So before we go any further, I just want to make really clear, if you haven't been part of any of our previous kind of intro to AI content, we're not talking about like super smart robots taking over the world or machines like, rising up against us. That's all science fiction. We're talking about despite the hype, despite the buzz, despite the headlines, artificial intelligence is a very real, very powerful technology, a set of technologies that we all as content marketers can use to do really, really powerful things in our careers and our businesses. So just keep that in mind, and we'll get into a little bit of what artificial intelligence actually is, but just keep that in mind as we're moving forward, that what you see in this picture here, that's not what we're talking about. It's not a robot coming to give you orders. We're talking about smarter technology that smarter professionals are using to do their work in a smarter way. So to give you a sense of that, today, artificial intelligence, which is still in the early days, it is still, inning one when it comes to AI. It is improving dramatically day in, day out. And today it can already do things like speed up content creation by generating outlines, summaries, ideas. It can even generate whole pieces of content in certain contexts. It can help make writers more productive by creating templates that you can reuse time and time again and at scale. It can help you align brand, language, and style across teams, and it can provide recommendations on what content works and what doesn't. And AI can actually even predict which assets, formats, and even topics will perform best before you launch them and have the highest impact possible on your audience and your revenue. Now, before we go any further, I want to make a really important note here, that notice that none of these are about replacing humans wholesale. At no point are we talking about AI automating away content marketing jobs and content marketers as a whole.
So Mike, let's touch on that for a second. So you're a journalist by trade. You head up content and editorial at the Institute. I have a journalism degree. I've spent 30 years in writing in some capacity, and we both have come from agency backgrounds. So can we talk about it for a few minutes about how have we reconciled our love of writing, our love of our craft, and realizing that AI is really has this power to augment what we're doing? And what was that aha moment for you that like, this is actually, I can still maintain my pride in my work and still use technology to help me?
That's a really good question. I think we should also discuss it more, some people's thoughts during Q&A. I would say for me, the big aha moment has been relatively recently in the last few years, especially with the kind of the work we do at the Institute requires a really deep amount of thought and care to create the content we create. And the only way I'm even able to do a lot of that is because I've freed myself up with some of these tools to do the things that I'm not that good at, to do the things I can't do at scale. So I can actually dedicate a lot more time to that unique human element in writing, which is really taking in a lot of different inputs, synthesizing a lot of different ideas, and connecting the dots for people in a way that my brain probably wouldn't have had the bandwidth to do 5 years ago or 6 years ago, let's say, because I was so busy writing the piece of content, manually sharing it, manually creating different formats for different channels, and a whole host of other things that now AI just makes so much easier for us. And so I think it's really important to understand this idea that we're not talking about AI replacing content marketers. We're talking about using AI to actually 10x the productivity, the agility, and the adaptability of human content teams. And really, at the end of the day, there is a caveat here. And the caveat is this: AI is not going to replace human content marketers, but content marketers that use AI are going to replace the ones who don't because of this 10x impact. It is becoming increasingly unsustainable to be able to not use AI in content marketing and still retain a competitive advantage. Again, it's not saying use AI to replace writers and content creators. It's saying that you need to augment them. Otherwise, you're going to be at a competitive disadvantage because today, and again, it's still early, AI is already taking over these major areas of expertise in content marketing. I mean, AI is already helping us build smarter content programs and strategies. It is capable today of content ideation at scale. You can create dozens or hundreds of ideas for topics, posts, headlines, etc., in seconds. And content creation, AI is making huge strides in this area. It can create, in certain contexts, expert content at a near human level. Now, it's not at a point where you're just clicking a button and publishing AI content. And frankly, that's not advisable. It is at a point, however, where it's so advanced that we're already finding new and inventive ways that it can help us do what we're doing today even better.
So Mike, if someone's just getting started, you're looking at strategy, ideation, creation, and I think you'll touch on this a little bit more, but just as a gut check, is there a better place to start than others?
It probably depends on what you do. Because I think really the key here is start simple. Maybe start with headlines or topic ideas versus saying, can I click a button and have AI reshape my entire strategy, ideation, or creation workflow? Because that's where you get really into the weeds really quick if you have no experience with AI. I would start small, start with a headline, start with a topic idea, start with an outline, and see where you can go from there. Now, before we get into all the use cases and tools related to AI for content marketing, I want to talk really quickly about what AI is. This is one of our favorite definitions of what artificial intelligence actually is. And it comes from Demis Hassabis, who's co-founder and CEO of DeepMind. DeepMind is an AI company that was acquired by Google and forms kind of the backbone of Google's AI efforts. And Demis says AI is the science of making machines smart. So what does smart actually mean here? It's actually a pretty simple definition of smart. AI is a smart machine because it can determine its own pathways to achieving an overall goal. So instead of your traditional software, which relies on rule-based logic, if-then statements, you or the programmer tells traditional software what to do, and it does it without fail. That's basic automation. Artificial intelligence is fundamentally different. It's able to actually chart its own pathways to achieve an overall goal. And we won't get too in the weeds on exactly all the things it can do, but the difference here is that artificial intelligence can find smarter ways of doing things at scale than traditional software can and that humans can. So just a couple quick terms to understand before we move forward. Artificial intelligence is an umbrella term. It's that science of making machines smart across a lot of different technologies and methodologies within the field of AI. So when we say AI, we're kind of using this umbrella term to broadly talk about machines that are able to be smart and determine their own pathways to achieving overall goals. The way they're able to do that is through machine learning. Machine learning is the primary subset of artificial intelligence. And really, machine learning is the ability of AI to learn from data, find a pathway to a goal on its own, and then actually learn from its experience. So machine learning is what is the magic that makes this whole thing go. Not only is your AI tool able to find a pathway to a goal on its own, it can actually learn from whether it got the goal, whether it achieved the goal or did not. And every time it tries to achieve a goal, it can learn to get better at achieving the goal the next time. So as you can see, instead of you having to wait for a traditional software tool to be updated at some point or to just break and not achieve a goal very well, certain AI tools can actually improve quite quickly over time. Now, one other term here that jumps out is deep learning. You don't need to know a huge amount about this at this stage, but just know that it's kind of a subset of machine learning that powers some of the more advanced AI capabilities that we see out there today.
Mike, one example you gave to me a while ago, to those of you that are just brand new to this AI stuff, is email software. So if you're using a CRM and you are going through and you're making lists, whether it's implied interest or job titles and things like that, you are manually making those lists, you are manually making those decisions, where if you're using an email system with AI baked into it, it can better track and automatically track a lot of those habits so that those lists are automatically created, updated on a regular basis, and you're not the person, you're not dependent on yourself making all of those things happen.
Yeah, and like we'll talk about, it's a really good way to put it. We'll talk about this a little more. There's always going to be a human in the loop with artificial intelligence tools. But the point here is that you don't have to determine on your own every single step that a machine has to take to achieve an outcome. You don't have to do all the thinking in a lot of cases. AI can do some of the thinking for you, and we'll see what that kind of looks like in content marketing as a whole, because it opens up all these possibilities that we historically have not had as content marketers. So before we wrap up our description of what AI is at a really high level, I think it helps to talk through the three core areas that we see AI applying to. And really, as we're going through these, just start thinking about which of these three core areas certain things you do every day fall into. There's three core areas that are AI for language, for vision, and for prediction. Now, language is obviously going to be super relevant directly to content marketing. The other two are as well, though. So when we talk about language, we are talking about AI's ability to actually write and understand language. So you can see here an example of this in Google's Smart Compose feature in Gmail. It actually looks at large language models. It understands exactly what words go together in which ways, and then it predicts what you're going to write next based on what you've written in the past. So within language AI, you're going to hear terms like natural language generation, natural language processing, and sentiment analysis. Now, again, you don't need to know what all these things are to get value out of AI. It's just good to recognize that when you hear certain terms like these, they're referring to language artificial intelligence. Another big one is vision AI. So you can see an example of this here with Google's Imagen tool. The AI can actually understand what words you're typing and generate an image on its own based on that prompt. So within Vision AI, you're actually duplicating human vision systems, the ability to see and understand imagery. And within Vision, you're going to see terms like computer vision, facial recognition, and image and video generation. So your phone is another good example here of Vision AI. If you have an iPhone, there's a good chance Vision AI is used to recognize your face and unlock your phone. Last but not least is prediction AI. So prediction AI is AI's ability to recommend actions and predict outcomes based on historical data. You can see an example of this here in a tool that we're going to talk about a little later called Persado. Persado's AI will look at historical data about users and actually predict what type of language those users will best respond to based on their historical behaviors, actions, and kind of psychological profiles. So within prediction AI, you'll hear terms like personalization, forecasting, and pattern recognition. So now that we have kind of this baseline idea of what AI is, how it's different, and what kind of the core areas are, it helps to now start diving into how do we actually find AI use cases in content marketing. So before we get into some examples, I want to give you just a quick framework to kind of start thinking about this stuff. So when you are thinking of everything you do in a day as a content marketer, as a business, as a content organization, you can start identifying what might be a really good task to apply AI to by asking three simple questions of each task. First, is it data-driven? Does it use data in some way to achieve an outcome? This could be simple as analytics. It could be a task that you should be using data for, but you haven't done, you don't have the right data, or you don't use the data you have. Any task that requires data to produce an outcome could be a really good candidate for artificial intelligence. Second, you want to ask, is it repetitive? When you're thinking of a task you do every day or every week, month, quarter, whatever, are there a series of common steps that you typically take? If there are, that might be a really good candidate for AI because it is very good at automating a specific set of steps. And then finally, you'll want to ask, is it making a prediction? So if you really think about it, a lot of the work we do as content marketers is based on making predictions, even if it doesn't really always seem like it. When you sit down and say, what content should we produce? You're kind of making a prediction because you're trying to predict what content will actually resonate with your audience. The same goes for any type of headline or formatting or whatever. You're predicting what will appeal most to certain people. So if you have any use case that is making a prediction, it's probably something that AI can help with. Now, as you go through the things you do in a day, you don't have to answer yes to every single one of these questions to have a use case for AI. If you answer yes to one of them, you probably have a decent use case for AI. If you answer yes to all three, you absolutely have a use case for AI. So to give you a sense of what this looks like in practice, we kind of took a look at our operations and what other people in the market were doing and came up with some of the top use cases in content marketing that we're seeing that are possible today. Now, this is by no means an exhaustive list. There are many more out there, and there's many more in the actual blueprint. So definitely take a look at that. But these are some of the more compelling ones that you might want to start considering in your own operations. So things like developing intelligent content strategies, developing and maintaining editorial policies. You can use AI to distribute content at scale across channels. You can use AI to generate, edit, and remix images, video, and audio. It can be used to optimize website content. This is actually one of the major use cases at the Institute that we use AI for. We actually use an AI tool to help us precisely optimize existing content to rank far higher in search. And it's already been a game changer for our business. You can use AI to recommend content, predict which content will perform best. You could use it to repurpose content. You can literally take a piece of content and use artificial intelligence today to repurpose it into a variety of different styles, like social posts and other formats that normally you'd have to do manually. You can use it to test different content formats, headlines, lengths, what have you. And obviously, you can use AI to write and edit copy, blog posts, content, and just other written collateral.
So Mike, I thought we could each take a minute to talk about one use case that you're using that would be different. You know, you and I are using AI tools very differently.
Yes.
So if you want to share a quick story, then I'll share a quick story.
Sure. Yeah. So one of the big ways that I use AI pretty regularly is using it for more strategic content work. So I can actually use some of the tools we have to figure out exactly which pieces of content or topics we should be focusing on, especially given that we're a small team. We can actually have a little bit of predictive capability to tell us, okay, there's probably a high likelihood me spending time to update that post or write this post could have a bigger effect on our business than kind of me just, using guesswork and experience.
That's awesome. I mean, it's so helpful because what we think is going to resonate or rank is very different than what the machine is telling us. Not always, but many times, or it'll help surface if you're, all things equal, we'll go, they'll show the difference between two that we think are similar.
Yes.
So one example I have is that we have our marketing AI conference, MACON, coming up in July, and I'm working on copy for ads, for social, for email, for blog post outlines, all of the promotional materials that you need to promote an event. So I use copy.ai, and there are many other tools, but I just have used copy.ai because it was the first one I used. It was free. So I typed in a 1,000 character description of the event, put in the URL. It took me a while to do the 1,000 word description because I wanted the output to be as accurate and as helpful as possible. So I typed in the 1,000 characters, hit enter, and I got pages and pages and pages of short form, long form copy that I went in, and to your point, Mike, human in the loop, I changed every single thing. None of it did I use verbatim, but it gave me an amazing starting point for all of these things. And then another one I did this weekend was I put one of your blog posts into ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT to write tweets for me and include hashtags. And again, I asked for 7 tweets. I edited all 7 of them, but it gave me a great starting point.
Right.
So, and again, for me right now, AI is just a time saver. It's giving me the content and a great starting point.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll definitely talk a little more about that as we get into what you should be talking to vendors about, but it's not a bad thing at all if time saving is the main or the only use case. It's one of the big 2 ways, in addition to increasing revenue, that AI can actually have a huge impact on the business.
And we're making sure that, the conversions are still happening, that it's still effective. If it was giving us, crummy content and we were using it and our results were decreasing, then obviously,
Sure,
we are
right.
making sure that we're getting equal or better results from what we were doing previously.
So to give people even more inspiration, and again, there are tons more use cases in the blueprint itself and many more out there, we took a few popular industries and also kind of came up with some use cases where we were seeing companies use AI in really effective ways in content marketing. So for instance, if you're a SaaS company, you could be using AI to predict the intent behind search topics. So instead of you kind of writing content that's really top of funnel and is not really helping drive demos and purchases, perhaps use AI to actually look for more purchasing intent content that you can allocate your resources to. You might use it to predict which text, video, imagery leads to the highest number of conversions. And you could certainly use it to automatically outline and generate blog posts for target audiences. In financial services, we saw one company, a big brand, it was a really interesting case study, actually use AI to standardize language and messaging to be more inclusive of audiences from all walks of financial life. You could use AI to personalize content to a user's specific financial data or goals. And you could certainly use it to generate outlines, scripts, and transcripts for hosted webinars or partner webinars. We certainly use it for that use case outside financial services as well. In healthcare, you can be using AI to generate summaries, outlines, and even simplifications of really complicated health content to maybe make it more accessible to users. You could use it to intelligently optimize existing healthcare content to rank higher in search. And you could even use AI to standardize the usage of medical terminology across teams and departments. There are AI tools out there that will actually help you automatically enforce those kinds of language standards across different teams of writers and different departments. And last but not least, in e-commerce, you can use AI in a ton of ways. You can use it to dynamically test landing pages, headlines, copy, content. You can use it to predict which ad content and images will lead to higher conversion rates. And it can certainly automatically generate product descriptions.
And that e-commerce is already using AI so much from a user purchasing standpoint, not, let alone their marketing.
Exactly.
So I know that obviously there's some crossover in a lot of these were just specific to a few industries, but when we look at things like healthcare, financial services, where they're regulated industries, how do you suggest someone would get started in like healthcare, for example, with HIPAA or financial services? Like, what should you stay away from and what could you turn to as a resource to help guide you?
Well, I'm very glad you asked because our first tool in 7 top tools for content
It wasn't
marketing
even a leading question.
addresses this precisely. So we're going to look at 7 AI tools that are some of the top ones in the space. There's many more in the blueprint. So again, take a look at that once you get the link. But the first one here is, our presenting sponsor, Writer. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Writer's general capabilities. It's an AI writing platform, but one thing that makes them really interesting and different is a lot of these writing tools are not specifically built for regulated industries. And it's a big concern because if you work somewhere that has extremely strict regulations, there might be some use cases that we've mentioned that would not be a fit for you unless you had to jump through a lot of legal hoops or take some risk around how you're communicating to customers, patients, whoever. Now, Writer is actually interesting because it does so many of these generative AI use cases, like creating content, brainstorming ideas, automating style guidelines, scaling distribution, and repurposing content. But it's been built from the ground up for like enterprise grade security and regulatory concerns. So HIPAA is specifically called out on their website. It is making HIPAA compliant content for healthcare clients. So my answer to your question is you find a company like this that is specifically called out, that it is specific for those types of regulations, because not all the tools, in fact, the vast majority of them probably are not built with this level of security and compliance in mind today. So another one we've alluded to, and I'm sure you've seen in the news, is ChatGPT from OpenAI. Love it or hate it, ChatGPT actually can be extremely useful in content marketing. You don't even need to use ChatGPT to write things for you. It can do some really cool other things that really streamline your content process. And we're using it today, for instance, to do things like organize notes into outlines. You can copy a bunch of really messy notes into ChatGPT and tell it to write you a bulleted outline that really organizes your thinking. You can use it to summarize transcripts and articles. You can put it through the paces trying to reword and rewrite content in different tones, voices, lengths. It can actually help you brainstorm a fair amount of decent content ideas, I would argue, that you could then use to populate editorial calendars.
And not every tool is great at everything. Like ChatGPT, like if I was going to do some serious research, I probably wouldn't select ChatGPT.
For sure. And that's why some of those use cases on there that I mentioned, I wanted to specifically focus on ones that use existing content you would be giving it, because there's some well-documented problems with some of the facts or lack thereof that some of these tools come up with when they're researching certain topics. So you always have to be wary of that.
So Mike, to that point real quick, and not to get too far off topic. So something like a ChatGPT or any of these tools, if we use it one time, they're all changing and they're all iterating in real time. Like if there's a tool that we're like, oh, that just didn't give me what I wanted. It could be that we put the prompt in wrong, or in 6 months or 1 month, something might change significantly. Do you have any advice on when to check in on tools or when to like maybe just give something another shot?
This is hard because of how fast the rate of change is. I don't think there's an easy answer here. I think you need to be checking in on these tools pretty regularly. That's part of, I think, some of the value we try to offer our community is we're trying to stay on top of all of these changes so that you know when to actually dive back in and try some of these out, I would say. I mean, it's hard to tell with something like ChatGPT. It could be 10 times better in a few months, might take a few years, it might never get there. But I would bet that the tools are changing faster than you think. So if you think you're overdue for a check-in, you almost certainly are. And I would certainly try out a tool again, or try multiple other tools. That's part of how messy AI adoption can get as well, and part of why we try to recommend tools that we know have really interesting use cases, is because you do have to try out a few different tools for each use case in a lot of ways before you can really bet on one, I would say. So another tool that I know Kathy uses quite a bit is called Descript. And Descript essentially gives non-professionals professionally edited video and audio. So if you have no background in video or audio editing, you can be using Descript to professionally produce webinars, podcasts, video clips for social, and transcribe audio and video. And the interface could not be simpler to use. It's quite affordable. I mean, I think several years ago, we used to be paying people a fair amount of money, production outfits, to produce things like our weekly podcast. So Descript has really put an immense amount of production power in the hands of people like me and Kathy that don't really have a formal video or audio background.
I mean, if you have heard me talk before, you'd think I have a side hustle of getting kids on the script to talk about them. But, I can edit videos by, it transcribes the video. I then can delete text. And when I delete the text, it'll clip the video. So I don't actually need to know how to go through and, cut the video. There's many other things but that's like, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can do this. But Mike wants a speaker reel produced. Paul wants a speaker reel produced. I can't do those. So I can do very, very basic, minimal things in video and cut our costs significantly. But for the bigger things, we still need the pros. So it's not taking everything off of our plates from a video perspective, or, our bigger costs.
Yeah, I would argue it just empowers us to do more, because when we were paying those pros for basic things, it's like we couldn't always afford to do the basic things. So we're now able to do that. And then also, reallocate those resources to the pros when we actually need them. And they're probably a little happier making really cool speaker reels than doing just like this basic editing that we don't know how to do. Another tool that is growing bigger in the generative AI space is called Go Charlie. Go Charlie is really well worth a look because it does all of the other writing tasks that some of these other generative AI tools do, but it also has some interesting features that some of the other ones don't. So for instance, Go Charlie can actually take a URL of a YouTube video and turn it into a summary of that video. It can rewrite content for you. It can summarize content for you. You can actually, it's got some image generation baked in as well, which is nice to see. So after you've used it to augment your writing, if you're doing a post, say, you can give it a text prompt and generate an image, like a DALL-E 2 sort of thing. And then it can actually also take images and turn them into alt text. So there's all these various ways that these tools can actually chip away at just these tasks that can take content teams so long to do manually and are so mundane, kind of repetitive. Just this is why it's so important to look at every single thing you do in a day, because I guarantee you for some of these smaller things, AI can probably help you out in a big way and in an affordable way. Grammarly is another huge one. I'm sure people have heard of Grammarly, but I wouldn't sleep on tools that maybe have these like less sexy use cases in content marketing. Grammarly saves us a ton of time by making editing super consistent, helping us adjust our content to make the tone, quality, and readability better. Every piece of content we create goes through Grammarly. It just saves me, for instance, the time and the bandwidth of having to sit down every single time and say, okay, let me try to remember that grammar rule again. Instead, I can focus on creating, hopefully, original ideas and content. So I alluded to using AI for content strategy. MarketMuse is a key part of the tech stack we use, and that's what this does. So MarketMuse has all these really useful features that help you make content performance more predictable. So for instance, we can identify the intent behind search terms. We can get intelligent optimization recommendations. We can create content briefs that tell us exactly how to rank for different topics. What I love is we have actually personalized difficulties that you can see in this screenshot. So what that means is the typical difficulty of a topic may be very, very hard to rank for. But MarketMuse uses AI to actually look at your specific domain authority and topic authority and say, hey, actually, based on a number of factors, this would be relatively easy for you to rank for. We've used this time and time again to outrank people on really difficult terms that, frankly, we wouldn't have known we could have actually ranked for based on the standard data that you get with other tools. And then we also alluded to Persado. So Persado is just so interesting in the sense that it uses AI to personalize messages to each individual type of user. So it can actually look at motivational preferences. So it might find that Kathy, based on her kind of historical behavior, seems more inclined to like language around achievement, whereas maybe I like language more around excitement. So it then tailors the same ad or piece of content to our different individual motivational preferences. And by doing so, ends up increasing the amount of conversions because you're actually encouraging people to act far more often by talking to them in the way that resonates most with them.
And Mike, I think that touches on a big pain point of being able to tie it back to conversions.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, that's where really at the end of the day, that's why you're trying to start thinking of the things you already do versus trying to find a reason to use AI. Look at what you already do and find a reason that AI can actually make it better, because then you're tying this back always to the things that matter most to you and your business. So I definitely want to go really quickly through how to assess AI vendors, because regardless of what use cases you come away from this with, regardless of what vendors, whether or not you choose to look at any of the ones we mentioned, at some point you will need to start talking with AI vendors. So I'm going to go through this really quickly so we can spend some time on discussion and Q&A. But here are some initial tips as you discuss your needs and your use cases with people who make AI technology. So this is the first and most important piece of this, that you're going to have to challenge vendors who claim they use AI to explain in simple terms how the technology works and how it is smarter than what you're doing now. Unfortunately, there's a ton of hype around artificial intelligence. There has been for years. And thanks to things like ChatGPT, we're hitting this fever pitch of people making really outlandish claims. There's a lot of buzz in the space. Vendors, the people you're talking to at a vendor, don't always know exactly how the technology works or what it can do. Like a salesperson at certain AI vendors may have been briefed by engineers or the founders, but they might not personally understand all the ins and outs of the technology. They may not be able to explain it in simple terms, or there may be people claiming that AI is used everywhere in a solution when it's only used in a small part of it. So you really have to be smart about how you open up conversations with vendors and just challenge them. If they have legit AI, they'll be able to do this. So you really do need to talk them through the paces of your challenges and how they can actually help you do what you're doing now in a much smarter way. So this really comes down to these two ideas, and you should ask your team about these as well as you're thinking through AI use cases. First, how can artificial intelligence applied to a certain use case produce an efficiency lift? Time and money saved. How can it reduce our costs by reducing the amount of resources required? Second, how can it give us a performance lift? How can we achieve our goals or achieve them more often? So this is increasing revenue or whatever metrics matter to your business. Now, AI doesn't have to do both these things. These are both equally important, and maybe one may be more important than the other based on your business. Like in one sense, an efficiency lift is how we're talking about repurposing content to save time. A performance lift might be how we're using AI to create better content strategies that allow us to do things we never would have done before. So both are equally valid. And you want to be thinking about both as you talk to vendors. Another really important question to ask of vendors every time you talk to them is understanding what will the machine do and what will the marketer do. The reason I say this is because today in marketing, in business, in life, there is no fully self-driving AI solution. If a vendor says you can push a button and everything just works, they are not telling you the full story. There will always need to be a human in the loop. So as you ask vendors questions about their technology, you have to realize that your team and your people will have to be at some level understanding these tools, using these tools, and overseeing these tools. So it helps to do upfront a lot of due diligence on what that looks like so you can get an accurate view of what your overall investment and time required to onboard with tools will be. So just a few final questions to ask, and then we'll dive into audience questions. Questions to ask about the vendor. You want to ask about everything related to the company's point of view on AI, what training and onboarding are provided, and importantly, as Kathy mentioned, how does the company help customers maintain security and compliance? That's both in regulated industries and understanding how the vendor's technology gets data, how it's trained. All of these things are really important issues that if you don't talk about them now with vendors, you could run into problems later. About the technology itself, you can just straight up come out and ask about the use cases for the company's AI technology. You definitely want to ask about how is it smarter than what you're doing today? Because if it's not, why are you even bothering with it? And importantly, are there any minimum requirements to get value out of the technology? So many solutions require a certain amount of data, a certain list size, a certain amount of people. You'll want to be clear on those restrictions upfront. And finally, you want to ask questions about your team. What kind of in-house capabilities do we need to actually get value out of this tool? What kind of training is needed? Is there going to be support during the onboarding process? I mean, some of this stuff is really, really simple to get started with, but some robust solutions aren't. You may need to take time and money to invest in upskilling your team. So last but not least, I just want to give one more shout out to Writer, www.writer.com. And instead of throwing up a screenshot again of the solution, I wanted to just show this really cool part of their website, because like I mentioned, they're a generative AI tool. They are a writing platform that can help you, any content marketer, do their job better. It's not just for enterprises, but what's cool is it's enterprise ready. So the things we talked about with HIPAA regulations, significant compliance and regulatory concerns, internally, just having a lot of restrictions on how you use data and using your data in a custom way to actually train AI models versus using something like ChatGPT. Writer tackles all of these and is built from the ground up to be the writing platform that actually complies with the needs of enterprises and everyone on down. So I'd highly encourage you to check it out. Even if you're a smaller team, they have licenses for those teams. So definitely give it a look if you are trying to do content marketing better with artificial intelligence. And then we definitely wanted to make everyone aware that once again, we are running our marketing AI conference here in Cleveland, Ohio, July 26th through the 28th. This is the premier event on AI and marketing, and it brings together hundreds of marketers who are all trying to do the same things you're trying to do with artificial intelligence. People come away from the event every year with new ideas, use cases, tools, and strategies to explore, experience, and engage AI better at their organizations. So please check out maicon.ai and do it before February 17th, because that day is when prices increase on tickets. If you're thinking about attending, that is the lowest price you will get, period. All right. So
which is tomorrow.
Which is tomorrow. So act fast. We said things move fast in AI. You have to as well. All right, so let's jump into Q&A and some discussion here, Kathy. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can both be on some video here.
Fantastic. Well, we have some great questions. Thank you, Mike. That was, as always, excellent. So let's just jump in. We've got about 12 minutes and we can go over a few minutes if people have time to stick around, but if you have hard stops, we'll try to move fast. So Matthew asked this a while ago and I gave him an answer, but I'd love to hear yours as well. Will current content creators become content editors and reviewers of AI starting points?
I guess it could be yes and no, depending on how you're thinking about this. I think that people think that writers are suddenly going to be all replaced because everyone's able to generate this content with AI. But what's missing from that analysis is that generating content with AI is great, but everyone can click a button and generate generic content. It's no longer going to be a differentiator. So you're always going to have to put in the work to create content from scratch with a human point of view. AI may very well help you flesh that out far faster and better than you would do writing on a blank page. I don't think the original thought that goes into writing is going anywhere. But I do think there will be a number of roles that might transition more to editors and curators. I just think that there's kind of more generic, say, top funnel SEO content writer. It's probably going to go more into a role that you're looking at almost shepherding a machine and doing a job and helping it help you do your job better.
Right. Awesome. And helps you, like you said, with your market music example, helps you decide if I'm torn between two blog posts to write, both of them seem like
Right.
a great fit for the audience. And market music is saying, no, this one is.
Yeah,
That helps
right.
you decide, prioritize, which is really cool.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about, I mentioned, don't use ChatGPT as like a research, as one example. Let's touch on plagiarism for a second. So it is using AI plagiarizing. How can you kind of explain what that all means?
So I don't think anyone in the industry has figured this out 100%, but from my perspective, you always have to be running things through plagiarism checkers. In my experience, a lot of the more robust AI writing tools, they're already accounting for that in their technology, but you still always do have to check. But the way these tools are built, they're not necessarily scraping someone else's content. They're synthesizing content across the internet or from a language model. So I don't think you have to be super concerned with direct plagiarism. I think you do need to just run this through plagiarism tools. And obviously there's a whole different debate around, ChatGPT in schools. Like if you're writing a paper with it, maybe you're not actually doing the assignment. So that's a whole different animal. But I think for writers, as long as you're taking basic steps that you would take normally, I haven't seen like a huge issue using the more advanced tools. I mean, they're not producing stuff that's plagiarized. So.
Okay, thanks. Delma's asking, do you know of any AI tools for research?
That's a good question. Honestly, I'd probably cobble together a few. I think honestly, despite the factual concerns, like sometimes a ChatGPT can be a really good start, but then you have to kind of augment that with manual research, because you can kind of ask it questions that you can at least get kind of threads to pull on and starting points. By just kind of like continuing to prompt it and query it versus having to go through like 20 Google results and read a bunch of articles and try to figure out where you should even start. So I actually think it's helpful in that sense. I haven't seen anything yet. That's why I'm super excited about some of the things coming out of the big search engines, because I look forward to the day we have an accurate, factual ChatGPT-like thing. Because for me, writing content and creating content, I don't always know what search term exactly to start with. I just end up typing random things into Google or like pulling on threads, like going to different links. So I don't think we're nearly there yet, but I look forward to the day we are.
Well, that's a good segue into prompts and prompt engineering. Do you have any advice on, something where you may only have 15 credits a month for something, you're trying to decide how to master that prompt? How would you go about doing that?
Yeah, I will say full disclosure, I'm still not like a pro at this. I'm still learning. One framework, like a mental model I heard recently that I found really helpful was, think of any machine you're prompting. Think of this very specific hypothetical scenario. You have a next door neighbor who is a genius. They know a lot about a lot of things, but you can only communicate with this neighborhood genius by sliding a piece of paper under their door. They're not able to see any of the outside world. They don't know anything about what you're trying to ask them. You can't talk to them through the door, the window, or whatever. All they see is what is on your piece of paper. So ask yourself, would this genius neighbor of mine be able to answer my question adequately with what is typed on the paper? And that kind of gives you a prompt yourself to flesh out and give context to what you're telling a machine to do. Sometimes you can get really good results just kind of firing off random prompts, but really the more context about a question, a problem, what you're trying to achieve, the better for any type of machine that uses prompt engineering.
Okay, that is like the most obscure analogy and most helpful analogy I've heard about that. I mean, it makes total sense. You and Paul talked about it on the podcast this week about large language models and
Yes.
how, do you recall that? He was
Yes.
talking, do you want to explain that real quick?
In which sense?
just when he was talking about, if we were going to write a post on something, write a blog post or an article, and we read a bunch of things.
Yes. So yeah, so if you think about it, the machines know a lot about a lot of things, but it's all muddled together. It's all synthesized. It's not referencing really anything in real time. This is why you run into so many problems factually right now with like a chat GPT. It's not built for that. It's making predictions based on the knowledge that it's been trained on. And sometimes it's right, but oftentimes it's wrong because it's not in real time going and fact checking itself. That's a whole other layer of technology that I think we're trying to get to, but just isn't happening in a tool like a chat GPT today.
Yeah, that was just so helpful to really say, like, it's me reading 20 books and I want to write a book and I'm getting all these little ideas and like,
right.
I'm not forcing anything. I'm just learning and I'm synthesizing and absorbing. And then I'm.
Yeah. So like as a human, if I said, okay, I'm going to go write a blog post in a week from now about large language models, and it has to be really, really smart. I might sit down and read 100 articles on large language models and then go write the post. Ideally, I'm keeping track of those links, but what if I just wrote the post with all this knowledge in my head and said, oh, here's this post on large language models. And you said, hey, Mike, where did you get that one piece of that paragraph? I probably wouldn't know off the top of my head,
But you also weren't cutting and pasting and stealing.
Correct. Yeah.
You're taking what you've learned.
Yes. So that raises all sorts of questions about, who owns what to cite. But that's fundamentally why you run into some of these issues with these tools.
Yeah. I think we have time for two more. A few folks have asked you if you could go into a little bit more detail on Market Muse when you are, what your problem is, what you put into Market Muse, and how that process works a little bit.
Yeah, sure. And I'm sure there are bigger enterprises using it in different ways, but for us specifically, being a very small team, what's really helpful, we use it both to create new content and also for existing content. So I would say in existing content, it's extremely valuable to understand what topics an existing piece should actually be optimized towards. So it can tell me, okay, here's the highest value topic out of all the ones this piece is already ranking for that you might want to consider. And within the ones you might want to consider, it also tells me, okay, here's the ones that you probably have the highest chance of ranking for. So me as the human in the loop has to still look at that and say, okay, is that actually relevant to our audience? And then once I dive into the actual post, it gives me a lot of guidance on how to actually update the post, which other topics to cover, word length, quality score, things like this, that help me pretty quickly and efficiently, in some cases, update posts and see a pretty solid rise in traffic. And so creating new content can operate much the same way, but obviously you're not starting with that content already created, which is where their content briefs come in. So you generate a brief on a topic and it says, hey, here's kind of the steps you would follow, the topics you would cover, and the gaps you would fill to stand a better chance of ranking for a really important term.
And the nice thing about that is if you're getting these topic ideas and it's saying definitely do an article on analytics because there's a gap, and like number 2 is content marketing, and this webinar is coming up and you want the CTA to come to this webinar, you're going to do that one first because it's more relevant to your audience right now. So you don't have to follow it, but it just gives you that guidance that you need.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's just, again, it's not like doing everything for us at all, but previously we would have done this in a very unscientific fashion, I would say.
Right. To answer everyone's questions, you're getting the recording of this webinar tomorrow morning around 9 a.m. Eastern. You will get the blueprint, an ungated link, and on the landing page where you'll see the video, I'm going to put just a ton of links. Use them, don't use them, but I'm trying to give you as much information as possible. And we have one more question, and that is if someone is a content marketer looking to take that first step and just either go to their manager and say, I'd like to try something, or maybe just start focusing more on the AI portion of their career, what would be something you'd recommend them starting with?
Well, the very immediate first step is honestly, after going through this webinar, go read through carefully the full blueprint, I mean, it's sometimes, we had to blaze through some topics on this webinar, but that'll give you the full step-by-step to really be framing everything you've heard today and everything you could be doing in the future together in your mind and say, okay, now that I'm ready, I would say you need to find one or more extremely narrow use cases. So very small, but very important use cases, and start testing technology for those to take the first step. Then once you're comfortable, start seeing which of those use cases you can pilot in your organization.
Wonderful. Right 1 o'clock on the dot. So thank you so much, Mike, for your expertise and for putting this blueprint together. I know it'll be a great resource for everyone here. If your teams would like to learn more, they can go to our website and watch the video and download the report. And we hope to see you soon.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you, Kathy.